You gotta help me, please. Hide me. The voice was tiny, a desperate rasp against the roar of the city. It belonged to a little black boy, no older than 7, who stumbled out of the shadow of a decaying brick wall right into the path of a small, unlikely pack of cyclists. They were a motley crew, a grizzled veteran courier, a young woman training for a triathlon, and the leader, Jackson, a mechanic with forearms like oak and a reputation for being tough but fair. They'd just finished a punishing climb up a back alley in the forgotten industrial district of Northwood, their legs burning, their minds focused on cold water and rest. The boy, dressed in a faded blue t-shirt and shorts, was vibrating with fear, his eyes wide and tracking something unseen behind him. He didn't look lost, he looked hunted. His most striking feature was a heavy, military green backpack that seemed far too large for his small frame, slumped low on his back like a shell. He didn't ask for a ride or money, he only asked them to disappear him. The urgency in his plea, a raw, primal sound, cut through the city noise and silenced their labored breathing. They pulled the brakes, their tires skidding softly on the gravel, a silent moment of decision hanging in the dusty air. The location didn't do much for his plea. They were on the edge of the Northwood rail yard, a place where deals got done in whispers and the only witnesses were rust and pigeons. This wasn't a family neighborhood. The cyclists, sweaty and clad in bright, unforgiving spandex, looked absurdly out of place against the backdrop of graffiti-covered warehouses and chain-link fences. Jackson, the mechanic, was the first to dismount, his cleats clicking on the asphalt. He knelt down, trying to match the boy's level, his expression a mix of weary concern and professional skepticism. The other two, Maya and Rico, scanned the street nervously. Their initial reaction was one of detached surprise, another kid in trouble, but the sheer, liquid terror in the boy's dark eyes short-circuited their cynicism. It was a stark contrast, the boy's obvious vulnerability against the hardened indifference of the area. A battered pickup truck idled nearby, its driver watching them with flat eyes, and a wave of unease washed over the cyclists. This wasn't a simple lost-and-found scenario. The air was thick with something dangerous, and the backpack the boy clutched wasn't a school bag, it looked like a burden. The silent tension between the innocent plea and the gritty, watchful surroundings intensified, pushing them closer to a commitment they hadn't signed up for. "She's looking for me," the boy whispered, his voice trembling as he leaned in close to Jackson. "My mother. You can't let her find me." He introduced himself as Elijah. The simplicity of the name contrasted sharply with the complexity of his situation. This wasn't the typical runaway story about a missed curfew, this was a desperate flight. When Jackson gently asked why his mother was pursuing him with such apparent intensity, Elijah didn't offer the usual excuses of punishment or grounded privileges. Instead, he reached slowly behind him and rotated the heavy, military green backpack off his shoulders. The weight was surprising, Jackson instinctively reached out to steady it. "It's not mine," Elijah said, his lower lip quivering. It's the reason." He didn't offer a full explanation, but the way his gaze darted down the street suggested a deep, physical fear of his pursuer. He didn't need to elaborate on the violence, the visible bruise blooming on his left forearm was a quiet, damning piece of evidence. The symbolic object wasn't a note or a toy, it was the backpack itself, a heavy, silent testament to a secret too large for him to carry alone. The bag had a small, tattered luggage tag tied to the zipper, it didn't bear a name, but a single, cryptic number written in fading marker. A cold shiver of understanding traced the cyclists' spines. The mystery had just been given weight, and a simple act of hiding was quickly becoming an act of deep intervention. Jackson, his professional distance collapsing, unclipped his helmet and looked at the bag with a growing sense of dread. Before he could ask what was inside, a sleek, black sedan, far too expensive for this neighborhood, slowly turned the corner 2 blocks down. It didn't speed, it cruised with predatory certainty, its tinted windows offering no glimpse of the occupants, but radiating an unmistakable aura of menace. Elijah gasped, a sound torn from his throat. "That's her. She drives that car sometimes. She knows I had to come this way." The immediate danger had materialized, stark and undeniable. This wasn't just an abusive parent, this felt like a cold, calculated pursuit, introducing the chilling possibility of something far more systemic than a domestic dispute. The cyclists exchanged frantic, meaningful glances. Rico looked ready to pedal away, adrenaline screaming at him to retreat from the escalating risk. Maya's face, however, was set in a hard line of conviction. The choice was brutally clear: pedal away and leave the boy to a fate they now suspected was sinister, or commit fully and risk becoming targets themselves. Jackson made the call with a curt nod, his decision overriding Rico's terror. Maya, take Elijah behind that dumpster. Rico, get out your phone and be ready to film if they stop. I'm going to look busy fixing a flat. The black sedan was now only a block away, its engine a low, menacing purr that echoed off the warehouse walls. The low rumble of the approaching car and the quick, silent scramble for cover solidified their unwanted role as protectors, transforming a training ride into a desperate, high-stakes standoff. The black sedan slowed to a crawl right beside Jackson. The driver's side window began to descend, revealing the profile of a woman whose face was composed, almost unnervingly serene, but whose eyes held a cold, ruthless glint. It was Elijah's mother, a person who clearly held power and was accustomed to getting her way. "Excuse me," she said, her voice smooth and entirely devoid of panic, "have you seen a little boy around here?" "My son, Elijah?" He wandered off. "He's carrying a big green bag." Jackson, leaning over his bike tire, his hands covered in fake grease he'd smeared on for effect, kept his head down. "Nah, ma'am. Just these alleys and my busted spoke. Haven't seen a soul but the rats." The tension was suffocating. She lingered, her gaze sharp, sweeping the area, almost locking on the corner of the dumpster where Maya and Elijah were flattened against the concrete. She pressed harder, her tone shifting slightly, a note of impatience seeping in. "The bag is very important. You'd remember the bag." It was then, in that moment of near discovery, that Elijah had his act of courage. From behind the dumpster, Maya accidentally knocked over a small, empty can. The mother's head snapped toward the sound. Before she could react fully, Jackson straightened up, pulling a crucial, decisive item from the very bottom of the backpack he'd partially opened. It wasn't money or drugs, it was a thick stack of laminated documents, legal papers, stamped and notarized, pertaining to a complex, ongoing child custody battle and evidence of serious financial fraud. He flashed the corner of the papers toward the light. The woman's composure shattered. Her serene mask broke into a snarl of cold fury and immediate recognition. She knew she'd been seen, and that her leverage, the narrative of the wandering boy, was compromised. Without another word, she gunned the engine and sped away, the tires spitting gravel, disappearing in a cloud of dust and defeat. The raw display of Elijah's defiance, embodied by the documents hidden in the bag, had won the battle, but the ensuing silence was heavy with the weight of the war to come. The dust settled, and the silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the boy's shaky, delayed sob of relief. The immediate threat was gone, a dark cloud swept away by the quick action and the glimpse of those papers. Elijah was safe, for now. The cyclists, their bodies still humming with adrenaline, exchanged exhausted looks. They were no longer just cyclists, they were conspirators, protectors, and now, unintended guardians. Rico, forgetting his earlier fear, rushed to Elijah's side. But the victory brought an immediate, sobering question: now what? They couldn't just drop him off at the nearest police station. The mother's power and influence, suggested by the expensive car and the nature of the documents, implied that the system itself might be compromised. The documents in the backpack, which they now fully inspected, detailed complex business transactions and illicit property transfers, implicating his mother and her powerful associates in a scheme that could land them all in jail. The backpack wasn't filled with toys or clothes, it was evidence. This wasn't a problem of abuse, it was a matter of state-level fraud, with Elijah as a crucial witness, and his mother's motive was now crystal clear: get the evidence back. Their temporary protection needed to transition into permanent safety, but they were a mechanic, a courier, and an athlete, not social workers or lawyers. The journey wasn't over, it had just taken a terrifying turn onto a much longer road. The relief of survival quickly dissolved into the daunting reality of responsibility, forcing the unlikely protectors to face the logistical nightmare of sheltering a child in hiding. The immediate crisis fused the unlikely trio into a cohesive, non-conventional unit. They took Elijah to Jackson's small, cluttered apartment above his bike repair shop, a sanctuary of grease, tools, and unexpected kindness. The following days were a steep learning curve. The tough exterior Jackson had built over years of street life began to flake away. He struggled to find clothes that fit Elijah, settling on oversized t-shirts and a pair of too long sweatpants. Maya, the disciplined athlete, found herself skipping training to learn how to prepare a dinner that wasn't just protein shakes and energy bars, coaxing the traumatized boy to eat. Rico, the usually detached courier, became the playful older brother, helping Elijah build a fort out of blankets in the corner of Jackson's living room, creating a small, safe world within the chaotic one outside. They had to deal with the traumas, the quiet, blank stares Elijah would sometimes lapse into, the way he flinched at loud noises. They learned to communicate not just through words, but through routine and presence. Jackson had to adapt his entire life, trading late nights at the shop for early mornings, making sure Elijah was up for breakfast. He learned that a child's needs, simple, honest affection and stability, were more demanding and more rewarding than any repair job. This transformation was an awakening for them all. They hadn't just saved the boy was saving them from their own small, isolated lives, forcing them to find a capacity for selfless love they hadn't known they possessed. With every shared meal and whispered reassurance, the rough edges of the three cyclists softened, their commitment to the boy weaving them into a new, complex tapestry of family. The fragile bubble of their new life inevitably burst when, after consulting an honest lawyer they found through Rico's network, they turned in the shocking evidence from the backpack and were forced to face the system. Child Protective Services, CPS, and a judge now had to determine Elijah's long-term placement. The moral debate was immediate and brutal. The assistant social worker, a woman named Ms. Evans, looked at Jackson, his tattoos, his rough appearance, the smell of oil that clung to his clothes, and saw risk. "Mr. Jackson," she stated flatly in the sterile courtroom, "your intentions are commendable, but you are not a fit. You are not related. You live above a business, and you have no established history of caregiving." The courtroom became a battleground of appearances versus reality, love versus bureaucracy. The judge, tired but fair, listened to the arguments, the lawyer emphasizing the documented love and stability the trio had provided, the social worker highlighting the unconventional, non-nuclear setting. It came down to a single, deciding factor: Elijah's testimony. Brought before the judge, he stood small but straight. When asked who he wanted to live with, he didn't point to the social worker or to a distant relative. He looked directly at Jackson, Maya, and Rico. His voice, once a desperate whisper, was now clear and firm, reciting his truth: "They hid me, but they didn't hide the real me. They let me keep the bag. And they didn't try to hide what was inside. They're my safe place. They're my family." His simple, devastating honesty cut through the legal jargon and the bureaucratic skepticism. He had chosen not just protection, but acceptance. The child's powerful, unscripted testimony became the final, irrefutable argument, challenging the institutions to see past the surface and recognize the true shape of love. The judge, a man who had seen 1,000 desperate pleas, looked at the raw emotion on Jackson's face and the tears welling up in Maya's eyes. Elijah's words had landed with the force of an institutional verdict. The mother's powerful connections and schemes were now the subject of a massive fraud investigation, the evidence from the backpack having sealed her fate. The judge ruled that the placement would be unconventional but necessary. Custody was granted to Jackson, with Maya and Rico designated as approved guardians and a mandated support system. The courtroom erupted in a quiet, collective sigh of relief and joy. Jackson, his hands shaking, knelt down and hugged Elijah tight, a silent vow passing between them: "You are safe. You are home." The group had not only survived the conflict but had emerged from it whole. They were now a family, not by blood, marriage, or conventional adoption papers, but by a profound, shared experience of crisis and a deep, unconditional commitment to one another. The mechanic, the athlete, and the courier had become a father, an aunt, and an uncle, their non-traditional life a testament to the fact that family is forged in fire, not merely signed on a form. The final gavel strike confirmed their bond, a victory that felt like a beautiful, messy new beginning, cementing their place as a family defined by choice and shared destiny. 3 years later, Elijah, now 10, is no longer the fearful shadow hiding from the world. He's a thriving, confident kid with a gap-toothed smile, a voracious appetite for reading, and a surprisingly competitive edge in board games, often beating his new uncles and aunt. Jackson didn't just keep the bike shop, he expanded it. Inspired by the kindness they showed, the entire non-conventional family established a community program called The Weight of the Bag, a small social project focused on providing bikes, mentorship, and a safe place for kids in unstable homes in the Northwood district. They teach repair skills and the value of integrity, lessons they learned the hardest way. Maya now balances her training with coordinating the mentorship network, and Rico uses his courier routes not just to deliver packages, but to check in on the kids in the program. Jackson, now simply Dad, looks at Elijah, who is meticulously cleaning his own new racing bike, and feels a profound sense of peace. The entire community has shifted. The bike shop is no longer just a place for repairs, it's a hub of genuine, resilient hope. The fear and the suspense are a distant memory, replaced by the inspiring proof that the most unlikely people can be called to greatness. The lesson they lived, and the motto of their new mission, was simple and true: sometimes, the heaviest things you carry aren't burdens, they're the start of a new life.